Release 411 includes a lot of new content. And it's new content that I think will bring back your casual player who's really left the game for the past month or so with the line in mind, because they realize that there's nothing that they can really do solo that isn't the same old status quo. This will be a pretty long video, so without further ado, let's jump in. I'm going to jump reasonably in depth in all of the different areas that improved in this release, so there are chapter headings down below if there's a certain area you're looking for. We're going to start out our list of FPS weapon changes today with the Karna nerf. Now, the Karna is honestly my favorite assault rifle in the game. I use it next to my AO3 all the time, so this is really unfortunate to me. A couple of the biggest things that they've nerfed on this is they've really changed the spread of the weapon when you're firing it. So the minimum spread, for instance, is increased from 0.1 to 1. That's an increase of 10x. Now, the max spread is increased from 5.5 to 7, so a little bit less of a change on that one than the minimum, but I definitely notice a difference in the testing with this weapon now. They've also changed the spread per shot, increasing it from 1.37 to 1.8, and they've changed the alternate fire speed as well. Now, I'm not really sure what those last two mean, but again, when I'm testing this weapon here, I definitely notice a difference, and it's actually a lot harder to hit your targets now. I'm just testing on one of those. I think it's a 12-sided dice, and just like the first shot goes well, but as soon as you actually start to fire it a little bit, it's kind of all over the place. So I think I'm probably going to have to look for a new assault rifle. Other changes in the FPS category, the Gallant has actually had some adjustments to the head cam shake, which actually smooth out the weapon fire on that. And it increases the damage from 19 to 21. Not a big buff, but still a buff nonetheless, so I may actually have to try that one out as my primary weapon. Now, I'm sure everybody's already heard of the Paramed medical device kind of drama that it's happening in this release as well. But essentially, now the medical device will actually take your pistol spot, not the multi-tool spot that it took previously. What that means is that you have a decision that you make. You have to choose whether or not you want to carry a pistol or you want to carry the Paramed medical device. Now, the Paramed medical device is pretty powerful in the game, but if you did want to carry the medical device, there is always the option to actually carry the multi-tool with medical attachment and put that in the multi-tool slot. So I don't really understand the drama that's happening around this one, but a lot of people didn't seem to like it. Now, as I'm recording this video, I actually noticed that the Karna weapon that you see me firing here now has animations on it, which I don't think it had before. Maybe I'm imagining that, but I'm pretty sure that's either new or recently re-added, because I think originally it was there, or at least supposed to be there. So moving on to the new weapon, they've introduced the Quartz Energy SMG. Now, this is a new energy weapon, and in true CIG style, honestly, it's a little bit overpowered. I think they will probably end up nerfing it in the next patches. It does have pretty limited range. They've adjusted this a few times, but as of the time of recording, the range of this weapon is about 15 meters for full damage, 25 for part damage. So it is a pretty close combat weapon, kind of very similar to a shotgun, if you will. Don't think you're going to make any ranged shots, but it is actually very difficult to tell that you're not doing damage with the animations that the weapon makes. So you do have to be pretty careful, otherwise you could be shooting at nothing and doing no damage whatsoever. Now, they've also made some changes to the Ripper SMG, that is the other energy weapon that was previously in the game, just to boost the damage range by about 10%. And you get about 0 damage at 35 meters now. So that's how the two energy weapons compare, is really the 25 versus the 35 meters. So starting at our general improvements category, they've actually added, I believe it's 6 more hairstyles into the verse with 4.1.1. Now, these are in line with the Inside Star Citizen that we saw a few weeks ago, and to be honest, I couldn't actually tell you which hairstyles they are, because I typically choose the first one, put a helmet on, and never look at my character again. That being said, I have done a little bit of playing with the hairstyles in the patch, in the PTU, and I'm actually quite impressed with the way that they look. I can't believe I've never noticed it before. But it is quite impressive how the hair flows side to side. And where I actually noticed it is on some of the helmets that have hair on them. I never gave it two thoughts, but if you're ever bored, take a look and see what you think. They've also added drops for the juvenile Valakar. That is the little worm things that pop up at the Hathor stations and in some other random places. Now these drops, I believe you pull their teeth, and they're actually used for some of the Wakelo missions that are now introduced in the game. I'll get to in a minute or two here. There's also some new metals that are found in the loot tables in places like the Hathor station, so keep an eye out for those as well, as they're used for the Wicklow missions. This release is also including 2 new script types that are being added into the game. Now, there's one for the Mercenary Guild, and then there's also another one for the Council. The Council, I believe, is the kind of Pirates Guild, if you will, where they allow you to kind of trade in stolen ships to clear the bounty on the ship. But anyway, the 2 new scripts that were added are actually 2 new physicalized currencies. So these kind of look like gold bars that you get for doing various different types of missions. Now this, I would say, is probably one of the biggest changes in 4.1.1, because previously the only thing that we could really ever grind for was credits, UEC. Now when Supplier Die happened a few months ago, they really flooded the economy with all of the credits that they gave out. I mean, I personally walked away with more than 120 million credits out of Supplier Die. Now, I know not everybody is that high, but the problem is it really takes the oomph out of wanting to play the game when you have enough money to buy pretty much anything in the game a couple of times over. Now with the introduction of these 2 new scripts, there's a reason for players to come back, and there's a reason for players to actually grind things out. The other major advantage that I see having these scripts is now it's really freeing up some of the things that were really for guilds only, or groups of players only, and allowing and opening it up to the solo player or the small groups of players. For instance, the new Wakelo missions that I'll talk about in a second. Now you trade in these scripts that you get for favors in addition to the Karenite. That really gives me something to play the game for and a reason to actually grind out some credits. I think, again, this is going to be one of the biggest changes that we see going forward. Now, speaking of Wakelo, they've actually done some refinements to his area and his hangars. I noticed, for instance, the cargo area is a little bit better lit, it's a little bit better decorated. They've also changed a lot of the missions. Obviously, there's new billboards and stuff like that in there. And it's really nice to see it kind of coming along. Now, as of the time of this recording, his actual Imperium is actually still blocked off. So I'm not really sure what they're hiding back there, but hopefully it'll be released by the time that this video is released, and I can cover it off later in the video as well. So as I just mentioned, they actually changed a lot of the missions, including what it takes to get a Wakelo favor, as well as what it takes to get some of the new ships. So something to be aware, if you're actually trying to grind those out, just getting the Karenite, that it actually takes a lot of the scripts, the Mercenary Guild and the Council scripts, to actually get the favors. Now, luckily, those are pretty easy to come by. What this means is that in order to get that Wakelo favor, instead of just needing the Karenite as you needed previously, you need less Karenite to actually get your ship, but you need a bit of variety in the gameplay that you're playing, which is a really nice thing to see. Now, to me, this also actually opens it up to the solo player or to the small group of players, because I may be an expert in bounty hunting. I can get the scripts that way and simply buy the Karenite. This is huge to me because I really feel like the Aligner Mine event kind of fell flat. None of the individual players really wanted to go play it, and it was really just the large guilds and groups that wanted to really dive in and try to beat it and to get the first Polaris. The problem is, when you're playing with a large group of people, only one person gets the Polaris. So what's the point in the rest of the group playing? Now I see these as actually being attainable by a solo or an individual player in time. This gives me a bit of a long game and a reason to actually play for a longer amount of time. We've also introduced new asteroid cluster mining bases into Stanton and Pyro. Now, these are very similar to how they looked in Pyro, but it's a very welcome addition on the Stanton side because it gives you a focus place to go mining and actually kind of gather with a bunch of friends and kind of focus around that area. Now, unfortunately, unlike the Pyro ones, the interiors of these are not yet completed, which is, like I say, a little bit unfortunate because it would have been nice to have another place to explore, but they are still a nice kind of cool place to go and hang out and to actually go and explore, even if it is just the exterior for now. Now, the one thing to mention is if you are out there mining or salvaging in these areas, there are some new mission types that will bring combat ships into this area with you. So you do have to watch out a little bit, as there may be enemies, PvP or PvE, that you're not necessarily expecting when you're out in your prospector, for instance, but still well worth it. Now, as I was testing this out and as I was actually mining in these areas, I did notice that they seem to be very high in some pretty lucrative resources, such as the first asteroid that I found had Quantanium in it. Now, I mean, I have hunted across the verse to find Quantanium for other videos and had absolutely zero luck. So the fact that the first one that I found was 25% Quantanium, to me was quite impressive. Now we move on to flight blades. Flight blades are a new component that can be added to select ships in the verse, and they allow you to actually adjust how your flight works. So for instance, with 4.1.1, it appears there's going to be 2 different flight blades that are introduced for each manufacturer. Now the first one will allow you to trade the top speed of your ship for increased maneuverability. The second one is the exact opposite, where you trade the maneuverability to increase the top speed of your ship. That actually allows you to customize your experience for exactly how you like to fly. So for instance, if you're a fighter pilot, you might want a higher maneuverability and not care so much about the top speed. However, if you're just flying cargo, it might be the exact opposite. Now, flight blades to me have actually a great potential in the future, and I can really see them starting to take a real foothold for crafting when it comes in. Instead of making the individual actually swap out their entire ship to do upgrades, for instance, you could just upgrade your flight blade, or create new flight blades or combinations of flight blades. And I can really start to see this taking off as you start to pull from here and there to provide buffs in other certain places and really customize how your ship works for you. Now, the only thing is, it doesn't look like they can actually be swapped out mid-flight. It can only be done in your hangar through a component, but I'm sure that they'll kind of work a lot of that out as time goes on. And I'm curious to see if they start to introduce the ability to have multiple flight blades per ship. Now, just to be clear, flight blades have nothing to do with automatically controlling turrets or anything like that, yet. But still have yet to be seen whether or not that's going to come or not, though. Next up, there's actually some significant changes to scanning. So it used to be that you could look at a ship, see who the person who owned it actually was, and go from there. Now, every ship will look like it's a deserted ship until such time as you actually scan it. I think this is probably in preparation for some kind of co-op level gameplay. But I think, again, that there's a lot of potential here. Despite the pushback from the community, there's a lot of potential here to really encourage co-op gameplay. Let's pitch a scenario, for instance, where you may have a scanning ship that's sent into a group of other ships in advance to really scout out and see what exactly is there, to scan all of the other ships. Later, would you send in your heavy fighters and your Polarises to actually attack the ships in the correct order? This, to me, is really what a multiplayer game like Star Citizen is supposed to be. It's not so much about having somebody sit in a turret. I mean, to me, honestly, those should be controlled by the blades. To me, it's more working together in different ships and allowing each ship to really show its true strengths as part of a larger organization of ships. As I mentioned, though, the community is not really taking these scanning changes very well. It's actually a lot of pushback. It doesn't look like a lot of people want to have to scan every ship, and I can understand in the absence of the co-op gameplay exactly why that's true. Come into a space station, you've got 20, 30 ships that you need to go and scan to see who's actually there. Okay, that might get to be a little bit much. We also have improved looting. I don't know how many other people have accidentally picked up a gun and replaced your fully loaded gun that you're currently holding out, just because you're trying to loot a body, but they've actually replaced that. So now you'll have a lot smoother time looking around to actually try to look at the different items as you try to investigate what a body holds or pull guns off a gun rack, etc. These are some welcome changes. I mean, I've lost a lot of subscriber fare that I have to wait for the next patch to come out, and it's really annoying. So I'm really excited to see these changes come in. And last but not least in this category anyway, we've got some new Wicklow Emporium items. So now Wicklow's Emporium actually has an entire upstairs. Now he's also brought in some of the other stuff specific to this release, new armor, things like that. Mech suits are back. Now there's 2 of them. No idea what that means. But there's actually an entire upstairs that has a lot of the other stuff that was replaced from downstairs. So it looks like they're going to actually keep that stuff around. And you can still actually trade for those items, which is actually quite nice. They're not fully replaced, which is quite desirable. This brings us into the new mission types that are being offered in 4.1.1. And starting off specifically with the patrol missions. Now, the patrol missions basically take you through a series of different predefined places, and at each of the places, random events will happen where you have to do a scan, or destroy an enemy satellite, or take out an entire crew of enemy ships. Now, so far I don't find these overly difficult, but I'm still at the beginning levels of them, so I'm sure they get a lot harder as time goes on. Now, these are run by Foxwell Enforcement on the legal side, or the Headhunters on the illegal side. So the way that the Foxwell Enforcement, the legal missions actually work, is there is no reputation with Foxwell, but rather the missions will unlock as you unlock the previous tier of missions. So if you think of it as, I don't know, maybe a 3-tier system, as you do 5 of the 3rd tier, the 2nd tier will open. As you do 5 of the 2nd tier, the 1st tier will open, which is very similar to Reputation, but Foxwell is going to be used in other mission types, and what you can't do is you can't really do the other mission types to unlock these. That's why it's different from normal Reputation. Now, on the Headhunter side, it does leverage your normal Headhunter reputation, so they do all kind of come out of a pool of reputation. So as your reputation increases in Pyro, for instance, for the Headhunters, obviously, it will also increase in these missions for the patrol and the ambush, which we'll talk about in a second. Now, these missions are actually location sensitive. So if you're in Area 18, you'll only see the missions for around Area 18, just to prevent you from having to fly around Stanton and Quantum, which is actually kind of nice, and I wish they would do it for a lot more mission types as well. Now, each patrol mission has the chance to spawn an ace pilot. And the ace pilot is essentially an elite member of the Frontier Fighters. And if you destroy them, they have a chance of actually spawning script on them. So make sure that you get out of your ship, grab the body, and actually strip the body of anything useful off of it as well. It doesn't happen on every mission, and it doesn't happen very often. And it's actually currently disabled in the PTU as well. But it is theoretically going to be available when the release actually goes live. Next up, we have the ambush style of missions. Now, essentially with these, the player is sent to an area that typically has a pretty high signature, so it's actually pretty easy to hide in. But you're asked to basically hide and wait. Now, what you're waiting for is a ship or multiple ships to actually come and fly in front of you. So the idea is that you go to the area that it designates for you, you reduce your signature to the designated level, and you sit and you wait. Now, I would make sure that you keep your ship on so that you can actually ping so you can see what's coming. That does make life a lot easier. The one thing to note here is that if you decide to ambush them too early or too late, then you'll fail the mission. So make sure that you're actually listening to the prompts and watching the top right to see when the mission changes to actually go and attack them. Now, these are very similar to the patrol missions in regards to the reputation and the crime stat. So with both the ambush and the patrol missions, on the Headhunter side, you actually have a chance of gaining a crime stat, so probably worth noting as well. And the reputation is done again through Foxwell. You have to unlock the different tiers through the Headhunters. Through the Headhunters, it's done through your normal Headhunter reputation. Now, the next one is actually one of the ones that actually really excites me. So this is the Handyman missions. Now, these are another form of industrial gameplay, which I'm sure will be expanded in the future, or at least I hope. And essentially, it takes the player through various places within Pyro. It's localized only to Pyro for now. And your purpose there is to really repair pipes and replace fuses. Now, this has a lot of potential to expand out, and it seems very useful for things such as 0 to hero missions, where you kind of start in an area and you're really their person to go and do everything. Now, I'm really excited to kind of do these because I do think it gives a bit of variety and a reason to visit a lot of the outposts that I just simply didn't have a reason to visit before. So if you are taking these missions, though, make sure that you bring a good supply of fuses and a full RMC canisters. They'll go a long ways. Now, the other option is to bring something like a vulture, because the vulture, when you scrape something and take the construction material off of it, you can craft fuses. You can also craft the multi-tools. So a vulture would actually be very handy in this case. I think a reclaimer, although it would work, would probably be a little bit too big. These are really meant to be more kind of beginner level missions. So I'd stick with either the Fortune or the Vulture instead of the Reclaimer. Next up, we've got the Gillies Gauntlet missions. Now, essentially, these missions are designed for experienced pilots who know how to fly, but they're maybe not the best with ship combat. They're also offered through Foxwall, and they really take the user through various different scenarios of ship versus ship combat. Now, there's 8 missions in total, and they range from a single target, go through taking on and prioritizing different targets, and they actually end with a capital ship, which I believe you fight a Polaris. So these aren't just kind of beginner missions that you want to throw at anybody or think that you can really take any ship through. And I think for the last one, you actually probably might need a few friends to help take it on with you. Now, you can share the missions, but I don't believe that the script is actually shared, which is a little bit strange, and I hope they work out. Because I think only the owner of the actual mission will get the script. That's not to say you can't help your friends out and then they help you. I'm sure we've all done that. Now, kind of as a precursor to this, you have the UEE training missions. Now, I believe that these are only offered as a limited time thing for Invictus, so make sure you take advantage of them when you actually can. And the idea here is that they're very similar to the Gillies missions that are offered by Foxwell, but they're actually designed to take a lot more beginner through the different PvP, and essentially takes you through a patrol and an ambush mission. So it's not just PvP, sorry, it's PvE. So you start out with a patrol, you go to varying different places, you see a satellite, you destroy it. Very simple, very straightforward. The second one for me was essentially walking through a beginner version of an ambush, which is actually what you're watching on screen here. And as you can see by my amazing combat skills, I might actually want to go through the training missions myself. It's not something I'm normally very good at, so please don't make fun of me too much. Now, finally, in this kind of series of missions, for Invictus, there's also going to be the Hunt the Polaris. Now, this is a continuation of the main storyline. In short, the Frontier fighters decided to come to Stanton, steal a Polaris. We have to stop them before they get back to Pyro. I'm sure that storyline sounds very, very familiar to kind of previous storylines that they've done during events like Invictus, but this time it's a Polaris, so at least it's not just the normal Idris. Now, as of recently, this is also an entire server-wide, or shard-wide, I guess, co-op mission, so everyone on the shard can actually grab the mission and go partake in it, so you don't have to worry about crewing up to try and take down a Polaris. Also, just a note, based on previous experience, if you are a player that's into the salvage gameplay, there's actually some pretty good opportunities for salvaging here, because a lot of beginner pilots will try to take on a Polaris, their ships will get destroyed. Normally, the hunting ground for the Polaris is just littered with dead ships, all for the taking. So the final combat-related missions that are back is actually the PvP bounty missions. So now if there's a player near you that has a high enough bounty, you'll actually get a bounty mission to essentially go and destroy them in their ship and send them to prison. It's kind of cool, and I think it does keep people a little bit more in line, especially with things like a line in mine, because with everybody centered in one area, now there's some real incentive to try and pick on that guy who's just being a spawn killer. So down to the 2 final different mission types that are all created for 4.1.1. There's actually a new mission to visit Invictus when it's on. So again, starting on May 15th and running basically through the end of the month, there's a mission where you get some free script to go in and visit Invictus. It's also worth noting that they're planning on hiding script around the Invictus hall. So make sure that you visit, and you visit reasonably often, because there will be script just kind of laying around for you to go and get and grab. That's kind of a nice touch, I think. And finally, the animal control missions. So with these, you're sent off to an area of Microtech, for instance, asked to destroy and control the population of a certain type of animal. You take them out, you loot their goods, and you're good to go. You achieve the mission. Now these are actually really handy in combination with the Wakillo missions, because it'll help get you to places for things like the Cave Copian. So just keep that in mind if you're actually looking for certain types of animal harvests. Up next, we've actually got the ship balance passes. Now, first off, they've added a new on-off toggle for the max speed limiter. So you can actually set it up so that it can turn it on and off, which I think is actually very handy. They've done some significant rework to how components work, and shields as well. So now it essentially is a little bit of a power triangle. So you have power, performance, and maintenance, and each of them pull on one another to really form your different types of component. What that means is that in order for the performance of the component to increase, power draw has to also increase, and the maintenance, the lifespan of it, has to decrease. So reading my example here, the closer to the center of the ultimate triangle, the worse for the component. So for instance, with power, as you get closer, that means it's actually going to be grabbing more power. That also means that your stealth ability of that component will be a lot less. The more power that it draws, the more emissions that it puts out, the easier you are to detect. Starting out with the civilian class, everything is kind of nicely balanced. It's in kind of a nice, perfect triangle in the center. As we move to industrial, the power draw is substantially higher, but the maintenance and the performance are the clear winners here, which means that the component might be very high performing and not require a lot of maintenance, or at least maintenance very often, but it is going to draw a lot of power, so you're going to be able to be discovered from miles away over something like a stealth component. Now, as we move into the competition style, it's totally different. You might have a super high performance, but the components will not last very long, and they're going to draw a ton of power. Now, the military class will be one of the highest performing that there is for the components, but it'll also be the highest on power draw. It'll also have some pretty good maintenance as well, so you're not going to have to do a lot of repairs to it when engineering comes. Now for everybody's favorite, the stealth component. This will have middle of the road performance, super low power draw, so your emissions are going to be incredibly low. You won't be able to be detected, obviously, with it being stealth. But the maintenance on them is going to be ridiculously bad, so you're going to constantly have to be maintaining these. Now, the shields are going to be done in a similar way to the rest of the components, except the triangle consists of the regeneration time, the overall health pool, and the maintenance as well. So for instance, one may have a super fast regeneration time, but a lower overall health pool. So you're really going to have to pick and choose exactly which class of shield and component you want to use going forward, which I think adds a lot of depth to the game. It also makes the game that much more complicated. So now jumping into the select ships. They've changed a bunch of ships, so don't think that this is a fully inclusive list by any means. I'm really just bringing the things of note. Now, the Argo Raft, I'm sure everybody's heard by now, but it's received a real buff to the amount of cargo that it can hold. So it no longer has the grappling hooks on the bottom. They're designed just to hold the 32 SCU. It actually just has a flat upside-down cargo bay, or cargo grid. So you can snap whatever you want to it. And it increased to 192 SCU. Now, this actually brings it into a new level, because this is a ship I would actually consider to compete with things like the Taurus and the Star Lancer Max. Now, this is incredibly enticing because it's a kind of a category in the cargo ships that they don't have a lot of competition for. The reason I bought the Star Lancer Max, in-game, of course. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with the raft going forward. Now, they've also made a bunch of different tweaks to things like thrusters and things like that, so who knows what will actually change by the time that the release actually goes out. But the raft has been kind of highly buffed in this release, and a lot of attention was paid to it. Now, next up, we have the Polaris. So the Polaris has been a roller coaster in this release. Their shields were decreased, then increased, and then decreased, then increased. I think where it finally stands is they're actually higher than they used to be. A lot of their weapons received major buffs and some major works, so you actually have animations and you can see the recoil when you fire. The main ship gun actually received, I believe it's up to 900 bullets now, as opposed to like less than 100 that it used to have. So I think generally it received a lot of buffs from the combat side. Now, the one thing that they changed that, to be honest, I really don't like is how it flies. It flies a lot more like the Reclaimer used to fly. It actually flies like a capital ship now. Now, just because I don't like it, I mean, I do agree that they should do it. It should fly like a capital ship. one of the reasons that I like the Polaris so much is it really flew like a small ship. It was very maneuverable, easy to get in tight spaces. I don't really think that it should be, but to be honest, I think they may have gone a little bit too far, because it flies like it's bigger than the Reclaimer does, but it actually is smaller than the Reclaimer is. So speaking of the Reclaimer, both Reclaimer and the 890 jump also received some maneuverability changes. Nothing super major, but it was really meant to make them feel like larger ships as well. So maybe it'll actually fly worse than the Polaris. I never actually verified that. Now the Anvil Valkyrie also received some kind of changes. Now I do believe that there's going to be a variant of the Valkyrie coming out shortly, so we'll see what happens there, but it's increased the hull strength and a lot of the joint health as well, which did make a pretty significant difference. And the thrust capacity actually increased as well, which increases the max speed a little bit. Finally, the Idris has received various buffs as well. So the main cannon on the Idris actually went from having 18 bullets to 250. A massive, massive increase. And finally on my list, there is the changes to the Gladiator. So this has received some pretty good HP buffs, going from 25k to 34k. Nothing to super vital areas, just kind of the smaller areas, which added up to make a pretty big difference. That is really all of the different ship changes that happened in this release. Mining has seen some much needed TLC in 4.1.1. You can actually remove the bags from all of the different mining ships, including the Drake Golem, and you can actually put them in another ship, transport them to a refinery, send them down the cargo grid, and refine them from the station. Now, as of recording this video, they have made a final tweak, which I'm not sure a lot of people realized, but the mining bags are now actually 2 SCU high as well. So originally when they put this change in, they were like 2.1 SCU high, so you couldn't fit them in something like the Vulture, but as you just saw, they actually fit pretty nicely in the Vulture. Now this, to me, really opens up a lot of opportunities. For instance, I can actually salvage a Prospector and take the ore off of it. That's amazing. That's not something we could do previously. So once the ore pods are actually in the freight elevator, or in the station's inventory, if you will, all you have to do is head down to the refinery and you really select them either from the ore sales console or from the refinery console, the same way that you would have selected your Prospector or mining ship previously. Now, the one important thing to note is that it will take every single pod that you have in the inventory and group it into a single mining job. So that is something you might want to be aware of, especially if you go and bring an entire Hercules full of pods back. It might make sense to send a few down, start a job, send a few down, start a job. Might be a bit back and forth. I can see it being something they tweak in the future. Just because if you were to take an entire Hercules full of ore pods back, you're talking like 15, 16, even longer days to complete that refinery job. Given the patch cycle that they currently have with releases coming out once a month, kind of unrealistic to try and do a 15-day refinery job. Now, entirely possible, but a little bit unrealistic. So once the refinery job is done, you can actually claim it the same way you always have, and you can have it automatically placed into a ship. Or, more importantly, you can actually now have it placed into the station inventory. Now, the reason that this is so beneficial, and not a lot of people realize it, is it allows you to go off and do a bunch of different mining jobs, refine all of them, spend, 2 weeks doing them, and then really spend a few days focusing on where you take your cargo. So previously, if you were dropping it all into your cargo ship, you would have to sort through it. You would need a pretty large cargo ship because it doesn't do a very great job of stacking it in there in the first place. But if I wanted to take gold to one location, for instance, I would have to take everything else off my ship, which really means that you're doing a lot more cargo runs. And honestly, if you're anything like me, you're probably going to be lazy and you're just going to take it to the place that you get a decent price for everything. This, to me, really allows you to stock up on a certain ore and take it to Pyro, for instance, where you might get the highest payout for it. A trip that wouldn't have been worth it before, but now I can take an entire Hercules full of gold over there. That's a little bit of a game changer to the way that we play and the way that we actually mine. So this, combined with the fact that I can actually take the ore pods off and store them in another ship, really makes mining something that I can do as part of a small group of people. If you had one person in a Polaris, for instance, and 3 or 4 prospectors out there, you could have the Polaris really just stocking up all of the ore bags, headed back to the ship to refine it once and split the goods in a few days when things are done. This is a game changer for mining, and I really think this is going to change the way that we mine going forward. Just to throw a little bit of a tidbit in as well, for anyone who actually was on the PTU and playing around a little bit, you now get your ore pods back as soon as you start the refinery job. I know that's not something the earlier renditions of this had, but it's really nice because you can go and throw 10 ore bags in the refinery. As soon as you start that job, you get all 10 ore bags back. So I mean, that's also a very huge win that I thought was worth mentioning. There doesn't really seem to be a lot that's actually changed with Salvage in 4.1.1. Now, I did notice that the price of RMC and the price of construction material in Area 18 and Orison does seem to be a little bit lower, but it's actually really hard to tell with the whole supply and demand thing, because I know the price does vary a little bit as it is. So I'm not 100% sure if they've dropped the price, and if they did, it wasn't by a significant amount. Now, I also checked the panels. The panels do seem to be giving the same amount of salvageable materials as they were in the previous release, because they did actually just reduce those down as well. So those seem to be roughly the same. Again, I'm just going off memory here. There hasn't actually been anything posted to any of the release notes or the patch notes when things have changed with Salvage. But I've discovered as I'm going through recording the video, there's actually been a lot of changes that weren't included in those patch notes as well. So now the big question, how do you actually prepare for release 4.1.1? Now, I'm a bit of an old school player, so my practices might be a little bit different than what's actually needed. And to be honest, just a disclaimer, this works like 80% of the time. It doesn't even work 100% of the time. I just find that it kind of gives you the best possibility of maintaining everything that you purchased. So the first thing that I do is I make sure that all of my ships are recalled to a planetary landing spot. I don't want them on orbital stations, anything like that. I want them all recalled back to Orison, for instance. Now, what you really don't want is you don't want any of your ships, especially ones that you purchased in game, be in a destroyed or an unknown status. It's actually very important that you recall, do the insurance claim on everything, just to make sure that you actually have your ship there. Now, I go as far as to lift it up on the landing pad and drop it back down to make sure that it's stored if it was destroyed, just because I know that actually forces a commit back to the database. Okay. Now, the other important thing to do is if you go through your Mobi-Glass and you actually replace any of your valuable components, maybe you found them in contested zones, Wicklow, however you managed to get those valuable components, pull them off, put them into the actual inventory of the landing spot you're at, and replace the components with something close to stock, or at least something a little bit cheaper. Your ship will be replaced, and more than likely it'll be replaced back to the way that it was when you purchased it. So you want to make sure that you have those components in your inventory. Now, this is the part that often fails. I did it in the last release when we went to 4.1, and quite honestly, I lost every component that I had. So the one thing I did notice is it doesn't work to just pull all of your components off. You actually do need to replace the components with something closer to stock as well. So I'm going to try that in 4.1.1 just on any components I've upgraded, just to give me the best chance you possibly can. Now, the other thing that I like to do is I like to take any SCU containers that I have laying around my hangar, I send them down the cargo grid, or I send them down the cargo bay, and I also unload any of the SCU containers that I have where I might have my special weapons, my subscriber fare, or something like that in one of them. I like to unload those into the main inventory as well. I just find that it gives me the best opportunity of potentially getting them back after it's not really a wipe, but after the databases are updated. Now, it's also important to go and sell any of the ore or anything, any consumable that you actually have. Make sure you sell it back. You will lose your water bottles or your cruise locks, for instance. You will lose your ammo. Those are things you really can't avoid. But if you have a bunch of Quantanium sitting in boxes, make sure that you actually go sell that, because that will more than likely be wiped as well. Now, this does bring us to a little bit of an unknown. So we have not gone through a patch cycle yet where Wicklow favors were a thing. Now, historically, CIG unfortunately will wipe anything that it didn't know about previously. So my concern would be if you have a bunch of Wikilo favors that are kind of just sitting in your inventory somewhere, you might actually end up losing them. So if you have anywhere close to a ship, it might be worthwhile buying a small ship even if you didn't want it, just to make sure that you don't lose them. Now again, this is really a big unknown because this is the first time that we've gone through this patch cycle this way with those items in game. It's entirely possible that the developers already thought of it and already addressed it, and they will roll over. But it really is just an unknown that nobody really knows what's actually going to happen. Same thing kind of goes for the Karenite and the other minerals that you find out of the Alanin mine. Now I have noticed that typically in my inventories, I will actually keep those release to release. Now we've never had those ones specifically, but the other ones that you get by hand mining, they do actually seem to persist. But to me, that's actually a little bit inconsistent because if I have refined goods like Quantanium, that doesn't persist. So I'm not sure if it's actually an error that it sticks around or what's really going on there. But I would probably sell those off as well if I were you. Probably worth mentioning, but for the cargo elevators, there is actually currently a bug in the live version of the game where if you go check the terminal, it'll actually just say loading items. It's very important you don't put items onto the cargo elevator if the terminal says loading items. So before you put anything on the cargo elevator with the intention to take it somewhere and sell it, before you put anything on there, go check the terminal, and if it says loading items, leave the terminal and go back into the terminal. That kind of reset it. And what you want is you want to be able to see the actual screen, so you have the ability to send it up and down. At that point, it's safe to put your items on the cargo elevator and send it down into the station. Just speaking from experience on that one, but I'm glad I found that workaround, so I thought I would share that with everyone as well. And finally, save your keybinds file. Now, this is something I would probably suggest you do every time that you change it. Just get in the habit. If you put a new keybind in, save the file. The same thing goes if you have joysticks. Make sure you're saving those keybind files because they are more than likely going to get wiped on the next release that goes out. I don't know why it happens. Most of the time it happens. If you have a backup copy, it actually saves you from having to completely redo it every single release. And I know that I've kind of gotten stuck in a bit of a loop, and it's actually the point that I wasn't using my joysticks for the longest time, simply because it was so annoying to have to reset those keybinds every time. Make sure that you save your keybinds file in advance of the release going out. Now, in a true YouTuber style, I've left the best tip for last. It's absolutely critical that you go into the game right now before the patch releases and remove any subscriber gear that you have on yourself, on your body. Take it, throw it into the station inventory or wherever you happen to be. You're honestly probably even better to throw it on the ground. But whatever you do, make sure that you take off all of your armor, all of your guns, your helmets, whatever you have that's subscriber gear, and put it into the station inventory. There is a bug in this patch that means that if you do not do this, you will lose your items. So again, please remove those items before the patch rolls out. I think that's everything and more that you need to know about the things coming in 4.1.1. Let's cross our fingers and hope that this is a decent patch. Till next time, we'll see you in the verse.